In this session, you will learn the most common business process notation system, and I'll introduce you to a few others. I'll also take you through modeling a few processes to show you how the various elements are used. And when you're finished, you should be able to start modeling the how. In other words, how and to execute step by step at level 5, the lowest level of detail, and document that process. I purposely put the business process modeling at the end of this overall training course because I want to make sure you really understand that the modeling is just one of the steps in the process, and it's there to help you understand how the process is currently executed, how they accomplish the work, and to gain insight into where the opportunities are and what kind of improvements you might make to the process. It's not the objective to simply create a model. It's just a learning tool. These are the 3 most common notation languages that are used in the industry. BPMN is probably the most broadly used and is the notation language that we will focus on in this training session. But note that there are at least 15 different notation languages. You should not need to learn all of these, but be aware there are others. Here's a helpful document that you may want to download and keep as a guide until you have memorized the BPMN elements in this poster. I've included this as part of your training materials, so download a copy, print it off, keep it by you. You may want to take a moment and do that right now. Let's take a look at the key elements of BPMN. The first is the event. An event is represented with a circle and denotes something that happens. Typically, these are triggers that start the process rather than activities, which are something that is done. The second is the activity. An activity is work that is performed within the business process. And the types of activities that are a part of a process are sub-process and task. And then there are gateways. Gateways represented by a diamond shape. It will determine forking and or merging paths depending on the conditions expressed. A sequence flow is then used to show the order that the activities will be performed in a process. And you have message flow that is used to show the flow of messages, in other words, information, between 2 entities in the process flow itself. And one sends and one receives them. Then there's an association that's used to associate data, information, and other artifacts with the overall flow of the elements within the business process diagram itself. Swim lanes represent subpartitions for the elements. These swim lanes may be contained in a larger swim lane called a pool. And then the swim lanes often they represent an organizational role, like a manager or an associate, but can represent any desired process characteristic. These are the basic elements of the BPMN diagram, and then there are variations of this within the overall structure there. Let's take a look at how these elements are put together in an example. The purpose of this slide is to give you the look and feel of a BPMN process model and show how the various BPMN entities are used. In this type of BPMN diagram, which is a single pool diagram, it's referred to as a process diagram. The pool has several swim lanes though, and you can see that the process starts with the shipment event. Then it uses a gateway. In this case, the shipment event triggers 2 activities, one to decide what mode of delivery and the other to prepare the shipment. Then each activity or subtask is shown along the way. Finally, the end event is reached, which represents the outcome of the process. In this case, things are ready to be picked up. Okay, let's use a little bit more real-life example here. So we've got 2 swim lanes here. One is the pizza customer, the other one's the pizza vendor. Things really start with the customer getting hungry for pizza. They go out and find a vendor who is selling pizza near them in their area. They select the pizza, they select what they're going to have on it, and then they place their order. It's the order when it's received by the vendor that then starts to trigger the pizza vendor's process. And the first part of that process is really to bake the pizza. And you'll note that once the pizza is ordered on the from the customer side of things, there's a timer that says they're supposed to get their pizza within 30 minutes. So that timer is waiting. If it happens to trigger, then the customer is going to call the pizza vendor and ask where their pizza is. Otherwise, they're a calm customer. Pizza gets baked. Pizza gets delivered. Pizza is received by the customer. They then pay the supplier. Payment is then received. And of course, the customer eats their pizza and their hunger is satisfied. Very simple process, but you can start to see how the various gateway elements, the events, and the process steps or activities are actually used to start to characterize a process at a very low level and detailed level within the business capability. There's a lot more detail that I could go into in here, but this is not really meant to be a BPMN training course. I would recommend that you go out, search the web for BPMN OMG. You'll find a 500-page manual out there that really goes through every aspect and every entity in the BPMN language that you could use and examples on how to use it. It's a good reference guide. You can download that, keep that on your desk as you're starting to think through things, or you run into questions that you might have on how to really characterize something in a BPMN language. Remember, as you're trying to define your level 5 process, it's often very helpful to put it in the context of your level 1, 2, and 3, start to break it down into some simpler level 4 diagrams, and then click into and finally detail out the process at level 5. Let's take an example. So here is a capability called initiative handover, where you're taking a program that is being rolled out globally. That capability is then broken down into 5 steps, where they gather the initiative materials, they deploy the initiative materials to the regional business units, they customize those initiatives materials for the region itself, and then they hand over that initiative material to the field sales organization. Then the field organization itself customizes those materials for their customers. That's the level, I'll call it 4. 4.1 is really taking that next step, blowing it out on terms of what's happening with those handover initiative materials to the sales organization, breaks it down a little further. Then it takes even further and looks at the electronic initiative publishing and what those steps look like at level 5. Putting things into context will always help you and also help your business sponsors understand what their current process looks like and then what the changes are that you're trying to implement that will improve it. A few important things to remember about these business process diagrams is, one, every diagram should have a title. Put it in the top center. All diagrams should have an owner. In other words, who is the author of that diagram? It's important for people to be able to know who to go back to. And all diagrams should have a date on them. When were they last updated? Processes change. It's important to know when that diagram was created. One that was created 2003 is not going to have as much value as one that's really just recently done, and you can have some confidence that this is up to date. A few other best practices that can be very helpful as a standard for you to really create. Each process should be decomposed into no more than 5 to 7 component processes. Wherever possible, fit that diagram on one page. should read left to right. Again, place the trigger on the left and the result on the right. Again, avoid cross links. Instead, duplicate the object when necessary so you should not have this thing looking like a spaghetti bowl. And then maintain the same size for all the objects. Here's an example of a business diagram showing all these best practices in one diagram. Note, some of these systems will actually create the author as an object so that you can reapply it, and then you can search the object or the owner to find out what diagrams they've created. Business processes are named with a noun and a verb to show action. You've got your date, and then you have messages or information flow. And again, the information itself are reusable objects. So in most of these more sophisticated BPM tools. Let's take another look at an example set of process diagrams. And I'll use a process that I think most of you are familiar with, which is grocery shopping. The larger level 1 through 3 environment diagram is shown here. It's really about planning, for providing for family meals. You can see the participants on the left and some of the other capabilities that are business processes that go into this, creating the budget, maintaining the family calendar, cleaning dishes. And then you have all your participants, the family member, the retailer, or maybe even a guest who's attending that meal. If we then explode what providing family meals means, you've got your plan the meal, your grocery shopping, of course, which will be the focus of the level 5 that we're talking about here, cook the meals, and then serve the meals. Note that if you have process key performance indicators, you should place those inside the process itself. Next, we do a double click on grocery shopping. As input, you have the grocery retailer, your budget, and maybe a newspaper. Before you go shopping, it's not uncommon to assess your current inventory, see what you've got in the pantry. That generates your shopping list for the items that you're going to shop for. And then there's some form of transportation back to the home once you've completed your shopping. Again, double clicking in further to what it means to shop for the items. You can see that depending on what shopping list you have, you may go to a club store, or maybe you're going to a high frequency retail, or you're going to end up ordering this item online. So this is your level 4.1, if you will, type of business process map. Finally, we've reached the level 5 process diagram where we're showing how to shop for groceries online. And it's showing all the detailed steps necessary to place your order for your groceries online. I think you can see how important it is to put things into context. If you were to just show this level 5 independent of all the other steps that are involved, you lose some of the context and possibly some of the opportunities to help simplify the process as you go through your business architecture engagement.